Friends, dear followers, in this video, I'm going to show you a gambit with the black pieces that's absolutely spectacular. You're going to love it because it's so easy to play, so easy to remember the plans, and you'll be able to use it so many times. Why? Because look at how often you'll be able to play this gambit. When your opponent plays e4, you play e5, and they play knight to f3. As soon as your opponent plays this, you can already go for it. This amazing gambit is one of the best I've ever seen in my life, and I'm telling you the truth. I'm going to explain it to you in full detail so that you leave this video knowing exactly how to play it perfectly. And not only that, but you'll be dying to try it out because it's just spectacular. So if you want to give me a like for bringing you this kind of video, I'd really appreciate it. All right, Chestiker, what's the gambit? Well, the gambit comes after playing this move right here, d5. It's a super unusual move because now we're giving away a pawn in a really strange way. All right, so what we're doing here is throwing our opponent off, or rather getting them out of their comfort zone.
When our opponent plays knight to f3 after the double king's pawn opening, they're expecting us to play knight to c6 to go into the Italian, the Spanish, or any normal opening.
They might even be prepared for the Russian defense or the Petrov defense with d6, but I'm sure
That they haven't prepared for this gambit.
so we already have a big advantage. We're going to throw our opponent off balance. They're not ready for this. So the opponent has two pretty logical options, and we're going to calculate and explain how to play well against both. What are the two main ones? Taking this pawn, which is completely free, right? You see it, right? We're playing a double king's pawn opening, they attack our pawn, and we defend it. That's why this move would make sense, although we could recapture here afterwards, right? All right, so that's one, and the other would be to take this pawn here, which is also super common, right? They don't take this pawn I've given away because maybe they're scared, I think it's a trap or something, and instead they capture this other one. Notice that if they don't do either of those, we would capture ourselves, and we'd be putting a lot of pressure and even winning a pawn. That's why these are the two main variations. All right, let's start, for example, with pawn takes pawn, which I love. Their response: you're gonna have to pay close attention, but you don't need to memorize the moves, just remember the plan. We don't want to recapture this pawn with the queen, because if we do, we're no longer playing in the gambit style. And look what would happen. They would attack the queen, and when we move it, they could just keep developing their pieces. They've developed 3 pieces, while we haven't developed any, and the advantage for white would be overwhelming. That's why we want to play in the gambit style, and not recapture this pawn. Instead, we're going to take advantage of the fact that this pawn is moved from here to push this pawn forward. Look, this is super important, super important. When they capture this gambit pawn here, you need to push this pawn forward to attack the knight. And what's our plan when we push this pawn forward? Well, to launch an attack on the knight on f3 so it moves toward the queen side. And this is very simple, just watch. Let's calculate all the options so we don't miss anything. If the knight retreats backward, that would be really sad. We could capture here, and our advantage would be overwhelming. This knight wouldn't be able to get out, right? Way too much of an advantage for us. So retreating backward isn't even an option I'd consider. Moving here or here would lose the knight outright, since we control those squares with the queen. So the two good squares, right, would be to move the knight forward to e5 or e4. Against both, we're going to react the same way, but it's just a little better to place it on d4, since here it's a bit easier to threaten, for example, with the bishop, with the pawn, with the queen, capturing here. Normally, they place it on d4. Like I said, it doesn't matter to us, because against both, we're going to react the same way, which is by capturing this pawn here. All right, notice that up to this point, everything has been forced, right? In the variation where we exchange the pawn, everything has been forced, we've advanced the pawn. The knight came over here, and we capture with the queen. This knight has to move. It can't go forward because we have all the squares covered. It can't go to this flank either. It has to go to the queen side. Very good. How are we going to continue? Well, now we're right where we wanted to be, aren't we? And remember this. What we want is to wait for our opponent to castle. If there's one thing you need to keep in mind, it's that we have to wait for our opponent to castle. So, how are we going to lead? By developing our knight. See how simple it is? You don't have to memorize the moves, you just need to remember the plan. We want them to castle, so we develop our knights. For example, here they could play bishop to e2, right? To develop. Yes, perfect. So what would we do? Well, we would keep developing our knights. But it's true that here they have much better moves than bishop to e2, like for example, knight to c3. So let's calculate this carefully. It's the only move in the position that puts us under pressure, since it develops the knight and at the same time attacks our queen, a queen that's in the middle of the board and could be an easy target for attack. Where does this queen need to go? Well, it's very important to remember where that queen needs to go. We should always place her behind the pawn. Why? Because that's the square where first she'll be safe, and second she'll be in control of the whole board, and especially toward the king side, which is where we want to launch our attack. Don't worry, if they don't castle, it's going to be a very pleasant game for us. But everyone castles, okay? So we're going to launch that attack against the castled king. That's the whole plan. All right, here they should keep developing their pieces. And notice they don't have many options. Up to this point, everything has been very simple, and it's going to stay that way. Why? Because, for example, they have to develop this bishop, and if they want to develop this one, it's really tough. Look, if they play d3, we would simply capture with a discovered check. They'd have to block, and whether we take with the bishop, the knight, or the queen, they'd lose material. So trying to develop this bishop with d3 would be a very bad move. Taking advantage of the fact that they can move this bishop, everyone is going to develop this bishop. It doesn't matter where they develop it, whether here, here, or here. The most logical and safest would be bishop e2, right? Because they're not threatening anything at all. So we have to think, have they castled? No. So let's keep developing our knights. Look at how simple this plan is. You can watch the video as many times as you need to really understand the plan. But don't worry, it's very simple, and you'll all be able to play it perfectly after watching this video, and you'll win a ton of games. Alright, now it seems almost certain that they're going to castle. If not, we would just keep developing our pieces as usual. But notice that they've already taken quite a long time. Finally, they can castle. What should we do when they castle? Well, our move is going to be bishop to e6. Look at what a beautiful move this is. A developing move for the bishop, and at the same time, it sets up a battery with the queen. Notice that this is called a queen and bishop battery, aimed at the opponent's castling, targeting the weakest point in their position. We're threatening checkmate. Obviously, if someone gets distracted and plays a weird move, we would just deliver checkmate, right? But, of course, almost everyone notices this. They see this checkmate and try to stop it. How could this checkmate be stopped? Oh, notice that moving the king wouldn't work because it would still be checkmate, and moving the rook away would be pointless too, because we would just give check, and no matter how much they try to escape, we would checkmate here. So we come to the conclusion that once white has castled, and we prepare our attack in this gambit, they only have one option to stop the checkmate, and that's to block it with the pawn. What? Many of you will say, now that we've weakened the white squares, let's bring in the bishop, take advantage of it, and even attack the rook. That would be a really good idea. However, there's an even better idea, all right? In most openings, this plan you've come up with would be great, right? You weaken the white squares and take advantage of it with the other bishop. Very good plan. However, there's a definitive plan to win much faster. Notice that the plan is to break through with h5. Very good. We have a very simple plan here. If it were our turn again, we would just play h5, and this would be more than one for us. Why? Because if they don't capture, we will. Either way, we would open the file for the rook, and notice how our pieces connect. Queen, bishop, and rook all focused on the same point. Checkmate would be imminent, which is why after the move h5, our opponent has no choice but to react to prevent this move. How can they prevent it? Well, I've been looking at it, and the only way to stop it is h4. Logically, that's the only way that keeps us from advancing. All right, then, we stick to our plan. Now, what's the plan? We can't get in. This is starting to look bad, right? For the white pieces, but we have to learn how to win. We're already winning here. You just need to know how. Our plan now is, notice that we can no longer start with this queen and bishop battery. So it's time to change the queen's diagonal. We want to break in through the white squares. You can come in either through here or through here. Notice that it doesn't matter to us. The moves themselves aren't important. You need to memorize the plan. Once we try to come in through here, look, it's very simple, really, really simple. White has castled, just so you remember, they've castled. Very good. Once they castle, we threaten mate. They have to stop it with this move, so we undermine with h5. We're threatening h4, which would win the game, so they have to stop it with h4. Then we switch the queen to a different diagonal. It doesn't matter if it's here or here, because we want to enter through this square right here. Very important. How can the white pieces stop this entry? Well, there's no way, because notice that if they bring the king over to defend, we would just enter anyway, since the queen is protected by our angel, which hasn't even moved yet, right? Notice that if they don't castle right away, you can always waste some time, so to speak, by developing this angel here and here, okay? Absolutely nothing happens, right? So here, no matter what they do, notice that you need to know the correct order to win the game, right? Whatever they do. I mean, for example, if they try to escape with the rook, if they do something else, it's exactly the same. Enjoy the plan. The correct move and the right order is to first destroy and undermine this pawn structure with our bishop. It's true that we sacrifice a bishop, but we simply have a huge attack. Why do we sacrifice it? Because notice that now we can bring the queen in exactly where we want it. Queen to h3 wins the game. Why? Because there's no way to stop this attack.
A lot of you will say, what are you threatening exactly?
The main threat is queen takes with check, and when the king moves, we would checkmate with the bishop. Notice that now the threat of queen takes pawn is super strong. How can this pawn be defended? It might seem like all of this is very long, but it's actually very simple because I'm explaining all the options and why we do each thing, so you can use it in your own games. How do they defend this pawn? The only way to defend it and not end up in checkmate is to bring the king here. However, it doesn't matter to us because we're going to checkmate in the same way. Look, how should we continue? First, we come in with check, the king can't keep defending the pawn and has to move away. If it goes backward, we're going to end up delivering mate. Actually, we could already checkmate right away, even with the bishop on h3. So they have no choice but to move forward. And here, they stop defending the pawn. How do we continue? Go for it. This is going to end in checkmate. You don't need to memorize how to deliver checkmate, but notice how easy it is to see that this king in the center of the board, thank you, is going to end up being checkmated by our pieces. If you want, I can show you an example of how to deliver checkmate, in case you don't know how. But it's very simple. For example, check, they have to block with the bishop. We bring in the knight, taking advantage of the fact that this bishop is pinned and can't capture. The king, for instance, might try to escape, might capture this pawn. Notice there are many ways, but anyway, it doesn't matter. You just coordinate your pieces to deliver mate. You give check with the queen, the king has to move. Now you give check with the knight, and in this case, you'd even be winning the queen. Check, we win the queen. Notice there are multiple ways to win the game. The king can move, or even, look, I give you check here, you have to capture with the knight because the queen is there and you can't with the king. Now I give you check with the bishop, and I'm going to checkmate you on the next move. At most, you can block with the bishop, giving it away. I'll take it with the queen, and when you move, I'll simply checkmate you here. So if you really learn this well, the plan, okay, you will be able to win a ton of games when your opponent plays pawn takes pawn against you. Now, of course, the most important part of the video is coming up. What happens if, when we play this gambit, which I think is called the elephant gambit, though I'm not 100% sure, instead of capturing pawn for pawn, which we've already seen is a very simple plan to go after the castling, as I said, you can watch this as many times as you need. You can save the video to watch it later. It'll always be available, free for you. What happens if they capture this pawn here? A move that is very, very, very logical and one that people play against me all the time. Why? Because we're basically giving away a pawn, right? All right, here we should capture Justice, this pawn here with the black pieces. No, okay? We're not going to capture here. Remember this well. If they capture here, what should you do? Advance and then capture with the queen. You remember, right? If they capture here, our plan changes just a little bit. We're going to play bishop to d6. This move is really, really good. Notice that our plan is similar. We're developing the bishop on the same square as before. We're attacking this bishop and also threatening a possible future kingside castle by the white pieces. Very well, if this knight moves, they're lost. We're attacking a knight. Here comes the first little trap. If the knight moves, we simply capture here, regain the initiative, and our advantage is just too strong. Our plan. What would it be? Well, it's very similar to before, even easier to play. Because when the knight moves and they castle, we could even go straight in with the queen. But, okay, so what happens? That nobody captures here. So let's put this back the way it was, right? This is here, the capture here, we play here. All right, nobody moves the knight. Instead, everyone just defends this knight with d4. It's the only good move for the white pieces. And remember, if they move the knight, we win with pawn takes pawn. If they defend the knight, which is the right move, let's see how to keep playing because it's very simple. They defend the knight, and now it's time to capture this pawn. Why? To prevent this knight from coming back to these two squares. Very, very good. Now, how can the white pieces continue? If they make a useless move, like bishop to c4, or any other pointless move, maybe bishop to e2, whatever, what are we going to do? Well, our plan is really simple. Do we trade this knight? We trade queens, and this position favors black. Why? Because we have a winning king side. Right? Very simple. But of course, there are better moves for the white pieces here. But anyway, I just wanted to mention it in case anyone was thinking about it. All right, here, in this position, after we've captured this pawn, so no one gets lost, what happens if instead of making a silly move, they play well, and for example, play knight to c6, attacking our pawn? To knight c3, they're always going to play this move.
Why?
My. Because we have a loose pawn here that's really annoying. So with knight to c3, which develops a piece and also attacks our weak point. So how should we continue? Because this is really, really simple. Well, when they play like this, all we have to do is play knight to f6, defending this pawn. It's true that now the white pieces seem to have a very, very easy game. Look at this, okay? I attack this pawn, you defend it, so then I pin your knight and threaten knight takes pawn. Now, this knight isn't defending the pawn because it's pinned. This game seems really simple for white, and I assure you this happens in most games, because all these are forced moves. That's why this setup is just so good. So when they threaten to capture here, we're just going to ignore them. We castle. Look at this, okay? We tassel. And you might say, chess teacher, what's your plan for when they play knight takes e4? Since that's a logical move, and that's why they're putting this pressure on you. Well, check this out, friends. They're already completely lost here. Our maneuver is going to be the following. You see how we have the queen pinned, and that's why this knight can't be captured. If this queen weren't here, let me explain it clearly so you understand. If this queen weren't here, we could just capture this knight right now and win a piece. So how can we make that happen? Without wasting time so that this queen isn't here. It's very simple. We're going to capture this knight first. You see it, right? Now they couldn't capture here because we would simply take with this bishop and win the piece. We've captured 1 and 2, and they've only taken 1. That's why they have to recapture this bishop with the pawn. And now we just trade queens, and what's happening here? The pin is gone now. When they take back the queen, we capture this knight and end up with an extra piece. Look at what an incredibly good position this is. 2 pieces for the opponent, 1, 2, and 3 for us. So if they capture this pawn with the knight, like we saw a moment ago, they'll end up losing a piece. I almost forgot the most important line you need to know if you want to play this gambit. Why? Because when they play knight to f3 and you play d5, the gambit we've been talking about throughout the whole video, in case anyone's lost, when they capture this pawn and we push our other pawn to attack this knight, instead of moving the knight away, which we've seen as a mistake because we launched the first attack from the video, they play queen to e2, a very strong move, since it prevents us from capturing this pawn due to the pin from the queen. Thank you. So how should we respond to this?
It's very simple, but you need to know it, because if you don't, you're going to end up struggling a lot.
And it's silly because I'm going to explain it to you now and then you won't have any problems. So all you have to do is just give up this pawn they're attacking. They're attacking it with the queen, so we're going to play bishop to e7. Yes, we give it up, but what we don't want is to get checked. So we put the bishop in front, and when they capture, they haven't given us check. We keep developing. How? Well, we develop the knight first. We're threatening the queen, so it has to move. Notice that it doesn't have many good squares to go to, because if it goes here or here, it blocks the bishop. So what a lot of people do logically is come here to give this check, and notice that here the move is not going to be bishop to d7. I'm sure you're all thinking of this move to keep moving the queen. However, that's not very good either, because they play queen to b3 and attack us at this point. Alright? We don't want that. What do we want to play? Well, our plan is very simple. Remember this well. c6 to block the check. And no matter how much they capture, we're going to recapture with the knight. Yes, we're down 2 pawns. Yeah, they can keep putting pressure on us. But notice that our position is very good for us to put pressure on our opponent. And you're going to see that next. How can we continue after this move? Well, we're going to castle, even though now this move threatens to win another pawn from us. We're down 2 pawns, and they're threatening to take a third. With bishop takes knight. Sorry, bishop takes. Queen takes pawn. 3 pawns down, and it seems like we have no compensation. However, this position is practically winning already for the black pieces. Our piece activity is so much better that we have a huge advantage. Both bishops have access to every square on the board. Our opponent has a bishop that can't move, right? And notice something important. We're being threatened by the rook, so we're going to place it here. A rook that, right in the opening, already has life. A rook that right now, you'll see it's going to be the star when they play queen to e2. You'll see, here the white pieces can do whatever they want. They can play anything. For example, knight to c3. It doesn't matter to us, because what we're going to do is play this spectacular move. Rook to b4, a move I'm sure no one thought of. And it's a move that basically cuts off the board and stops the queen from going back home. Because notice, it can't get past here. You see it, right? We've got the rook controlling it. And this rook is even defended. Very good. Here, if they keep playing, like threatening our rook or castling, it doesn't matter because we're going to threaten the queen. So if they threaten your rook, same thing. We threaten the queen, which is worth much more. And this queen, as you can see, is completely trapped. It can't go anywhere. What? Because of this knight that's been placed on c3. If they put the knight on c3, this queen is trapped. But a lot of you might say, okay, Justices, sure, but what if they don't play knight to c3? What happens then? Of course, if instead of playing knight to c3 in this position, they play any other move, like castling, for example, then this no longer works, because the queen can always go back to this square, and all our attack is useless. Alright, so I recommend the brilliant move, rook to b6. Notice that you shouldn't just remember the moves, but the plan. The plan is that yes, we're down material, but we have spectacular initiative with the queen in the middle of the board. We threaten her with the rook. This queen, yes. Now, she has a square to go to, it's fine, but that's not really the goal. Even though we can keep improving our pieces while attacking her, for now, the queen still has squares. However, notice that now we can bring the knight into the attack. I love this, bringing the knight into the attack. It seems like we're not threatening anything at all, but we're actually threatening to win the game in a very easy way. No matter what they do, we're going to capture this pawn here. Notice that if this pawn advances, it's even worse because we jump in with the knight to cause this mess. So whatever they do, we capture this pawn, sacrificing another piece. Notice that right now, if we play this, we don't care about material anymore. We want to win and deliver checkmate. If they capture here, we could even win the queen with this discovered attack. Notice that the queen here in the center is going to be lost no matter what. But not only that, we've now won the game, because when they retreat, we could simply not capture the queen and let them escape, or let them capture with a move like bishop to b7. And even if they capture the bishop, we only have to recapture, because after bishop takes knight, it's checkmate. Notice that this king can't escape in any way. I hope you really enjoyed this video. Leave me a big like if you did. See you tomorrow in the next video, friends. Goodbye.